Despite Caesar having been out for more than half a year, she still plays a unique role on her teams. In addition to simply absorbing damage, Caesar offers parries alongside high days, an attack buff to a single ally who uses her shield, and a damage increasing debuff on enemies. Before we dive into the guide though, there's been a lot of recent discussion about Caesar and whether she's still as strong as people initially thought, and the main concern here is that miasma can affect allies even while they're off field, which raises questions about her long-term value. Similar to how Zhongli's shield was once challenged by new enemy mechanics in other games, there's no guarantee Caesar won't face the same kind of counterplay here in the future. To add to this, people have also been noticing that Caesar's attack increase to the team has noticeably fallen off when comparing to other characters like Astra Yao, Jafufu, or other characters that provide buffs to all characters on the team, unlike Caesar. That said though, Caesar is still a solid option if you're taking too much damage or need some damage increasing buff. But before we begin the guide, if you learned something new or enjoyed today's video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Without further ado, let's break down everything new about Caesar in version 2.0 and whether or not she's still worth your pulls. Caesar plays like a stun support hybrid with a strong emphasis on timing her parries. Her parry mechanic is really the only aspect of her kit that matters, as this allows her to counter enemy attacks and unleash follow-ups that cost no energy, but of course this is assuming that you time it perfectly. In doing so though, she generates shields for the entire team while building daze to then set up for stun windows. However, her value does extend just beyond dazing. She also provides utility through her shield's anti-interrupt, the attack buff that she also gains while her shields are active, and a rare 25% damage taken debuff via her additional ability. With this, Caesar fits perfectly when you either need damage or when you need a bit more survivability. Let's now break down Caesar's kit, starting with her core passive. Her core passive is what ties her entire kit together. When she successfully parries attacks or uses certain skills like her EX special / ultimate, Caesar generates a shield for herself that she can then transfer to her team. This shield not only mitigates damage, but also grants the shielded on-field agent 1000 attack and anti-interrupt, making it much easier to land high combos as you're unable to be staggered / interrupted while said shield is active. Caesar's shield also scales not only with a flat value, but also directly with her impact stat, making impact more than just a secondary bonus. It becomes a core stat to prioritize. This transforms Caesar into a part defense, part stunner, part support hybrid, offering damage buffs, the ability to stun, and survivability to the team. Notably, Caesar doesn't protect the character that is being swapped off field, which does mean that if an agent is on field as a big attack is happening, don't expect Caesar's barrier to protect them while they're performing on field and lingering from the previous swap. Caesar's additional ability activates when she or a teammate is capable of performing a defensive assist, but with this said, to activate said ability, Caesar must first perform a perfect block, retaliation, defensive assist, or use her charged basic attack, Dead End. When said additional ability is triggered, it applies a 25% damage taken debuff on enemies within her area of effect, which then lasts for 30 seconds. This synergizes especially well in fights where Caesar can frequently trigger defensive assists, allowing her to then maintain high uptime on one of the most important aspects of her kit. Now let's talk about her basic attack chain. This consists of 6 swift slashes that deal physical damage, but while her basic attack by itself doesn't seem special, holding this basic transitions her attack into Dead End, where Caesar then spins and tosses her shield, dealing AoE physical damage while also somewhat bringing enemies closer together. To be clear, this does cost a single assist point to perform, but this can definitely be worth it as it does actually have its uses. In fact, while overall Caesar's basic attacks are generally not worth doing, using Dead End and giving up an assist point if you're in a rush to activate her additional ability can definitely be worth it in certain scenarios. Caesar's special attack is a 2-part strike centered around her parry mechanic. When used properly, Caesar can block an incoming enemy attack at the perfect moment, triggering a no-cost energy parry counter. This counter then unleashes high daze and applies a shield to the on-field agent, but with this said, the first part of her special attack that we just talked about is known as her parry counter. The second part of her EX special is overpowered shield bash, and with this, Caesar is able to perform another follow-up attack after her initial EX special. This attack is significant because it costs less energy to perform, but in addition to this, it still retains the same feature of being able to stun the enemy, all while also activating Caesar's core passive and generating a shield. Now, while Caesar's first EX special attack itself applies a solid amount of daze and gains even more value when used for a perfect block, she can also simply activate it to grant her the powerful barrier, and this will immediately provide her with increased attack and anti-interrupt, all instantly swappable to another agent. This makes her incredibly simple, but still strong and versatile. Caesar's assist mechanic is very important for her gameplay goals, and this is mostly because of her defensive assist plus follow-up. Said defensive assist not only allows her to stagger and gain invincibility during enemies' attack, it also triggers her additional ability, applying the 25% damage dealing debuff to enemies. Her dodge functions like other characters, granting invincibility frames, but while her dash attack can be used to activate retaliation, this can prove to be more difficult to use unless we're accounting for specific situations. Rather, sticking to either defensive assists or EX specials will be generally ideal for Caesar, but this isn't to say that Caesar's dodge abilities are useless. Her dodge, in fact, can be used to quickly exit the field, which then becomes especially useful in high-level optimizations, such as dealing with Typhon's defensive assist mechanic more efficiently. Caesar's chain attack isn't a high priority ability, especially given her role as a support/stunner hybrid, and that's because this damage is much weaker compared to a dedicated DPS agent's, so its primary value can only really come from triggering the 4-piece effect of Swing Jazz for team-wide damage. However, this is of course assuming that she even has it equipped, as most will actually prefer something like Protopunk or Astral Voice as her ideal 4-piece set. Much like her chain attack, Caesar's ultimate delivers a strong hit, but its actual value isn't even in its damage or its days. Since she's not a true main DPS or even a stunner, her ultimate, and similarly even her chain attack, is better used as a backup option to reapply her shield or as a means to maintain the Swing Jazz 4-piece effect. Now for her ultimate specifically, while the cast time may feel a bit long and the impact underwhelming, these aspects of her ultimate matter less when used as a more reliable on-demand defensive tool, especially in modes like Battle Tower where decibels can carry over, and using her ultimate to reapply her barrier will be more worth it as sometimes energy generation is more limited. When leveling Caesar's abilities, you should definitely prioritize her core passive first, since it directly enhances her shield and attack bonuses. But following this, focus on her EX special attack, which enhances her parry and daze potential. Her assist skill comes next, as it is what she'll be using the most after her EX special or her core passive, but finally her basic, dodge, and chain attack are the lowest in priority. Now let's talk about Caesar's combos. Now although there are some fancy secret techs here like the dodge mechanic from earlier, Caesar really is as straightforward as you'd think. However, that isn't to say that Caesar doesn't have options for how to begin combat. The first method takes a bit more patience and knowledge of the boss's start of encounter behavior, but with this setup you can start the fight using another agent, then wait for a defensive assist trigger, and after this, Caesar can then assist onto field, instantly activating her core passive, applying her additional ability debuff, and then generating her shield, providing her with the attack buff, anti-interrupt increase, barrier, and debuff all within a tight, efficient window. The second method works best against bosses with delayed or unpredictable openers. Here, Caesar can precast her EX special right before combat begins, or hold it depending on how much she has. Then, as the fight starts, she opens with either the saved EX special from earlier, or she can open with her charged basic attack to apply her additional ability debuff, followed by an immediate swap to your DPS. Now, while this alone will already grant Caesar her shield and debuff, it does not trigger Protopunk unless if you perform a defensive assist off of Caesar to then swap to the next agent. However, as long as that condition is met, she applies and keeps all relevant buffs before swapping off the field. Now, outside of the fight's opening, Caesar's difficulty mostly depends on how well you can dodge/parry. Now, while her shield might seem like a defensive tool, it's actually more similar to a conditional buff trigger than a true layer of protection, especially if you need the attack increase part of the buff more than anything else. This is because her attack and anti-interrupt buffs only remain active while the shield is intact, and therefore relying too much on its damage absorption can actually work against you, making dodges and parries more important than absorbing or tanking hits. That said, it's important to note that Caesar's shield fully absorbs any single instance of damage, no matter how strong it is, and this effectively allows her to nullify even the most powerful of hits once, making it a reliable safety tool when used. Now, of course, reapplying the shield isn't super difficult to do even after the start of combat though, as she just needs to perform an EX special or an assist follow-up plus EX special afterward to regain said barrier. For W engine choice, her best in slot option is her signature, Tusks of Fury, which increases shield strength by 30%, team damage by 18%, and daze by 12%. This engine perfectly synergizes with her kit, and ever since Caesar's release, this W engine has offered some of the best value to any supportive/impact focused defense agents. If Caesar's signature is off the table, Original Transmorpher is a solid alternative thanks to its 16% impact bonus at max rank, though it's still around 15 to 12% less efficient than her own signature. Peacekeeping Specialist is another usable option, but it is noteworthy that this is more niche for anomaly oriented setups, while Spring Embrace Voice offers energy regeneration at the cost of losing impact. Moving past these options, however, some players may just choose to run stun W engines like Fossilized Core or other S-rank options like Hellfire Gears purely for the impact main stat, and this of course is still viable as it does benefit Caesar's core utility. For supportive agents like Caesar, both Astral Voice and Protopunk are top tier disk drive options, but they both come with different activation conditions that affect their overall value. Astral Voice requires you to use quick assists as it provides 3 stacks of Astral that then boost the incoming quick assist agent's damage by 8% per stack. However, this bonus only applies if Caesar or another squad member is consistently entering via quick assists, and notably only one set of Astral Voice can be used per team. Protopunk meanwhile focuses on assists, offering a 10% team-wide shield size increase from the 2-piece set effect and a 15% team-wide damage buff for 10 seconds after an assist via its 4-piece effect. Now, while both are supportive in nature, Protopunk is slightly less powerful in terms of its damage buff, but despite each set being viable and powerful for its own reason, both would still prefer having 2-piece Shockstar in order to complete their set. Now, on the topic of disk drive sets though, part of the reason why Astral Voice is not the immediate go-to option when using Caesar is because others on the team may benefit from Astral Voice. To add to this, Caesar is much better at activating Protopunk than nearly any other character in the game, and as a result, in order to avoid overlap and maximize team efficiency, Caesar is often the ideal candidate to switch off of Astral Voice and instead run Protopunk on. Stat-wise, Caesar prioritizes impact, physical damage percent, crit rate, and crit damage where she can find it, but as certain stats like impact and damage percent are not available in substats, these will be her ideal / prioritized main stats. With this, her 4th, 5th, and 6th slots are Disc 4, crit rate / anomaly proficiency, Disc 5, physical damage, and Disc 6, impact. To clarify, Caesar's main stat focus depends on the type of team she's paired with, and when supporting anomaly teams, her main stat should lean more towards anomaly proficiency, while in crit-based teams, it should then shift towards crit stats. This also affects her substat priorities, as anomaly proficiency and attack percent should naturally take priority for anomaly setups, while crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent become more important for crit-based builds. As for her ideal stat line, Caesar performs best with around 50% crit rate, 100 crit damage, and at least 170 impact, but beyond this, any additional stats that you find should be invested in either attack, crit rate, or crit damage, as this will continue to improve her damage performance. Now let's talk about Caesar's Mindscapes. Caesar's first Mindscape grants the entire squad Radiant Aegis at the start of battle, which can then be triggered once every 300 seconds. Now, while active, enemies with a 5-meter radius of any shielded ally will suffer a 15% reduction to their attribute damage resistance, effectively increasing the team's damage output. Now, while the actual benefit here can vary based on team composition and range, testing currently places the value of the damage boost at roughly 20% on the low end, making it surprisingly strong value for a first Mindscape, especially for players looking to maximize Caesar's early investment. Caesar's second Mindscape enhances her core passive, Barrier of Resilience, while Radiant Aegis is active, and with this, her energy generation is increased by 10%, and the Shield Bearer's attack buff is also buffed to 150% of its original value. Now, while the extra energy can be situationally useful, the real highlight here is the significantly stronger attack buff, which then translates to roughly a 20% increase in Caesar's team adding DPS once again. Now, when combined with the value of her first Mindscape, Caesar's M1 plus M2 performance are absolutely fantastic breakpoints for players aiming to maximize Caesar's team DPS. Caesar's fourth Mindscape grants her 3 assist points whenever she uses a chain attack or ultimate, and additionally, if her energy is below 20, she can then use her EX special attack overpowered shield bash by just consuming 1 assist point instead of the normal cost. Now, while this has a 5-second cooldown, it is worth noting that compared to her earlier Mindscapes, this one is definitely less impactful overall, as its main benefit is adding additional methods for Caesar to generate her shield. That said, however, it can still be situationally useful in fights where frequent defensive assists or energy management is more necessary. At Mindscape 6, Caesar increases her own personal damage, and with this, her parry follow-ups and assist attacks become guaranteed crits, with her EX damage also being increased by 50%. To add to this, she also gains a massive crit rate and crit damage boost for 15 seconds after triggering her EX or assist, and this basically turns her into a pseudo sub DPS with decent uptime on both her personal and team-wide buffs. Now, while previous buffs definitely buff her team DPS, this one is definitely more fixated for those who love Caesar and want to clear with her as the main DPS for whatever reason. Now let's talk about Caesar's signature and whether this can be more worthwhile than pulling for a second copy of Caesar. Now, Caesar's signature W engine is generally more accessible thanks to the 75-25 banner split and and it offering solid damage increases / value across the board. That said, losing that 75-25 for a useless W engine can feel extremely bad. By contrast, pulling for Caesar's first Mindscape will increase team-wide damage by adding res shred and extra stats, but this is at the cost of a slightly smaller shield and stunning somewhat slower. On the topic of losing though, not getting the featured rate here will also feel bad, especially for its cost, but in this case you would technically still be getting one step closer to guaranteeing a limited banner agent, which is kind of the way that we all have to cope when losing our 50/50s. Overall, I don't believe this choice has a single simple answer, but given that we haven't seen the full potential of defense agents yet, there's a good chance that Caesar's pretty universal W engine will be great value, especially compared to Caesar, who does currently struggle at times to fit in teams as their best in slot. Caesar is considered, however, to be one of the most flexible units in ZenlessZoneZero, and this is because her kit offers great value across nearly any team composition. Unlike other defense agents that are one-dimensional or don't offer enough value in terms of buffing, Caesar combines shielding, attack buffs, and damage increasing debuffs into a single cohesive playstyle. With this, however, some of the highest performing teams I've had with Caesar include Miyabi Caesar Astra, Soldier Zero Ambi Trigger Caesar, and Ishuen Panyanhu Caesar. These lineups are undoubtedly strong if you're aiming for fast clear speeds and solid deadly assault scores, as they rely on top tier limited DPS agents to simply brute force high damage numbers. However, while effective on paper, they don't fully showcase Caesar's potential. In these setups, she's reduced to mostly just a source of attack and damage percent buffs, overlooking the other value she has in her anti-interruption and staggering with her actual abilities. With this, Caesar's real strength shows when you build around characters that struggle with stagger or being interrupted. Her shield and anti-interrupt make it much easier for squisher agents to therefore stay in the fight and keep up their damage, and with this, I've had the most improved results with teams like Corin Trigger Caesar, Piper Bernice Caesar, and Evelyn Lighter Caesar. Now, while these teams are certainly not always the highest damage dealing lineup, they definitely feel way smoother to play, especially against enemies or fights that hit back often. Agents like Corin, Piper, Ambi, and Evelyn really do benefit from the protection Caesar gives, letting them go through their full damage combos without getting knocked around. So if you're looking for cleaner, consistent runs, especially in content with enemies that attack a lot, these are the teams that Caesar can really shine with. Now let's talk about Caesar's value and worth. There are of course many pros and cons, so let's detail and outline a few of you to consider before you choose whether or not to pull for her. For pros, Caesar's anti-interrupt barrier makes getting hit far less punishing, allowing for more consistent combos, and her attack buff and damage percent debuff offers solid team-wide DPS boosts, making her a reliable and independent support. Even outside of a dedicated stun roll, her abilities will also still apply decent daze and stagger, but finally, as a physical attribute agent, filling and completing her anomaly will then increase enemy days taken, adding extra utility when paired with other physical DPS or attack agents that prefer to deal damage once an enemy is stunned. For cons, her damage buffs can feel underwhelming compared to units like Astra, and even free-to-play options like Lucy or Nicole can offer comparable DPS support in some scenarios. Additionally, as a defense type agent, Caesar doesn't always fulfill additional ability conditions for units like Miyabi, Hugo, or Ellen, who require a support or stunner, making team building more restrictive in some cases. So if you're looking for a versatile support unit who improves survivability while still offering solid team DPS boosts, Caesar is a great pick. Personally, I picked up Caesar back when she was one of the strongest early supports for Jane Doe, and as some of you might remember, she formed an incredibly powerful team with Seth, with Caesar providing attack buff and a barrier, while Seth providing an anomaly proficiency buff and his own shield respectively. The overlap of these two shields made Jane, or really any solo anomaly carry, feel super unkillable, but even now, I still find value in Caesar, even if it's just for her attack increase or just for her anti-interrupt. As always though guys, there are obviously going to be fights where Caesar is stronger or weaker. It really just depends on the encounter that you're bringing her in, but admittedly there are more options nowadays that do make Caesar's damage increases specifically feel more outdated. But as I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with, the barrier from Caesar and its anti-interrupt is pretty invaluable, especially as there aren't that many characters in the game who do what she does. That said, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you again for watching everyone. I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night.